Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across time.
Hi, I'm Mark Hoffman, proud member of the Conversations Across Time family and a retired history teacher. These are the times that try men's soul. These words were written by Thomas Paine, the character I play on this evening's show. They were written to rally the colonists against the tyranny of George III of England. Also on the panel with me tonight are Spartacus, the slave gladiator who organized a revolt against Imperial Rome. Ida B. Wells, the African-American journalist who fought for women's rights and was instrumental in getting anti-lynching laws passed in the United States. And Horace Greeley, the founder and editor of the New York Tribune, whose abolitionist editorials led to the passage of the 13th Amendment and the end of slavery. Tonight's show deals with tyranny, fascism, and the culpability of the press in allowing these tyrannical forms of government to rise up in our country. Stay tuned for an educational and provocative show.
Good evening. Welcome to Conversations Across Time. Tonight we have a very eclectic panel assembled, and the reason for this will soon become apparent because we are now discussing whether or not the media has failed this country. Has the media failed in the past election? Have they failed us? And so assembled for this discussion, to my far right is Mr. Thomas Paine. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Paine.
It's great.
We look forward to hearing from you.
It's great to be here, and these are perilous times, so I'm glad to be here with you.
And we're glad to have you. Seated next to Mr. Thomas Paine is a person who has been here before, and it is the warrior Spartacus. Welcome, Mr. Spartacus. Seated to my far left is civil rights icon, publisher, Ida B. Wells. Welcome, Ms. Wells.
Thank you for having me.
Seated next to Ms. Wells is Mr. Horace Greeley, who also a publisher, also very responsible for helping to get the 13th Amendment passed. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Greeley.
My pleasure, madam.
And to my immediate left, as you know, she's always here, is my co-host, the co-host of Conversations Across Time, former Pennsylvania State Representative Babette Josephs. Welcome, Babby. I know you are raring to go.
My pleasure.
So what I'd like to do is ask you, Spartacus, in that you were involved in a revolt that almost toppled the Roman Empire. I would like to ask how the media impacted what you did, because the media at the time was something that perhaps the audience is not familiar with, but how did the messages spread and how were you able to use the media?
Well, the simplest way to explain it is people talk. They always have, and as long as they have mouths, they always will. There was later times became known as a town crier. Essentially, this is just a man yelling at people. Generally ignored him, but
We're used to that. We have a man who yells at people a lot nowadays.
well,
Yes.
yelling is going to continue.
People call him president.
Yeah, well, I've heard about that. I've heard about that. People seem to be listening.
Some. Not the 3 million people who didn't vote for him. He's the minority
voting.
president.
Voting, it's a novel invention.
But the obligation of the media and how the media impacts a message getting out, whether it's a good message or a bad message. I believe the character that we're referring to was Corsus.
Oh, Corsus, yes, Corsus Publicus. Yeah, he was always public. And of course, not always dis.
Well, and so I think what we are looking at is the importance of getting the message out and how that impacts.
And a message that has some grounding in reality.
Yes,
Facts.
yes.
Real facts. Real things that happen.
Yeah, well,
You can have different interpretations.
facts.
But if somebody says, this crowd was a lot smaller, your crowd was tiny, there's proof. You can say that's because of X, Y, and Z, but it's still a smaller crowd.
Well,
That's what happened to our so-called president when nobody came to his inauguration.
well, now as then, facts can be quite expensive.
And
Yes.
what's interesting about that is that in Roman times, we do know that that Courses was certainly susceptible to the pressures of the mercantile class, in that merchants used him to advertise. I mean, that he would say, well, this merchant has the better grain and this is the better bakery. We have that now, but it's the advent of corporations controlling the media. And I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of how we look at the messages that go out to the public and how they can be impacted by money, by dollars and cents. And Mr. Greeley, certainly as a publisher, and Ms. Wells as a publisher, you're certainly probably very much aware of how the impact of corporate dollars, they weren't called corporate dollars during that time, but they were merchants, rich people's money, and how it impacted messages that went out.
Yes, it is true, madam. In my era, before I began to publish the Tribune, a lot of the articles that were written by the popular press were very sensational crime reports and scandals and celebrity gossip and advertisements for quack medicines. I mean, it was not of a high quality, and in the course of my career as a publisher and an editor, I've had to suffer some financial setbacks, like drops in people purchasing my paper and loss of revenue, but fortunately that did not deter me from doing what I felt I had to do.
But the advertisers, that is interesting about your legacy, is that the advertisers did not control the messages that went out.
That is
The
true.
messages that you publicized didn't have to do with being controlled, being bought and paid for. You were not, and the Tribune was not bought and paid for by corporate interests.
That is true, madam. I felt free to discuss serious topics that in my era, and not just what you call a celebrity scandal, but serious schools of thought such as the works of Charles Fourier and abolitionism that had to be discussed. Like I had to suffer some of the editions being prevented from going into the South through the mails. I endured that, but I felt serious discussions like women's suffrage and abolition had to be brought to the open.
Let me just, I want to go back to you, Mr. Spartacus, because there's something very interesting that happened. The media was much different at the time. Courses Publicus represented messages going out to the people, but your revolt started with slaves, and from that expanded to challenging the mightiest empire that existed at the time, the Roman Empire. And it was done through word of mouth, and of course we know that you had spies listening to the messages of Courses Publicus, but it's just now looking at us relying on a more sophisticated press, and our messages, the message of the people is certainly no less impacted by merchants. You didn't have that happening, and I'm just wondering how you view what is going on today with the press and how the media is being used. How do you view that versus what you were able to accomplish, to take a small band of slaves and threaten the Roman Empire?
The difference is scale, it's size. Really, I don't think very much at all has changed. I think that the ways in which power are exercised have changed because force, actual force, is much more local, but the threat of force expands rapidly, very rapidly. So, I mean, taking a band of men and escaping is just a matter of force of arms. It's not elaborate. There's no complexity. You have a sword or a fork or any other implement of force, and the threat does most of the work. In this case, with
are you saying the perceived threat? In other words, the aristocracy succumbed, or your revolution was so successful because they perceived you as a larger threat?
No, I'm not saying that at all, but if we were to attribute the success to any factor, it would be men with knives. Rather than
people heard about them, more people heard about that than people actually saw men with knives, I should think. More people heard there were guys out there going to get you with a knife than who actually saw one with a knife.
Well, you have to remember that at that point in time, most people had seen a man with a knife,
But
and seen
as part of an army of slaves?
See, but it wasn't just slaves, it was also freedmen that joined
Yes.
Europe.
And how did they find out?
there's an old expression. I don't know how old it is. They had it in Thrace. You probably heard it here too. Say if you can't beat them, join them.
Right.
Well, there were more men with knives,
Okay.
and I mean, I can't tell you why, but people now, you have your food in a box, and they bring it to you, and you put it in another box and make it hot. But in this time, there were animals, and they made noises. Meh. And then you have a knife, and you stick it in them, and they're dead. And then you have fire, and you cut them up and put them on the fire, and then they're done. You eat them. So this force that you're referring to was not an abstraction. You're talking about a threat to the aristocracy. There's no perceived threat. There's a knife.
So, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but Mr.
But we've seen there's a difference between seeing an animal bleed to death in front of you and knowing that the same knife could do the same thing to you.
But Mr. Spartacus, the goal of your revolution was not to topple the mighty Roman Empire. It was to free yourself and your fellow men. You could care less about the tyranny or oppression of the Roman Empire other than how it affected you directly, correct?
What the revolution, that's the wheels, right?
No,
So what you're saying is that your rebellion, I use that word.
Oh, yeah.
Was not to topple the Roman Empire, just to gain your freedom and your men's freedom. You could
Topple the Roman Empire. Didn't it take, it was
Yeah.
several centuries after.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no,
You had no philosophical goal, I guess that's what I'm saying.
I have an aversion to being forced to work and held captive.
Yeah, I understand
Yes.
that.
I don't like that.
That was
No.
your philosophical goal.
But I
wasn't it?
figured
Yeah.
there were knives, and I went back to the animal thing. I figured if I had a knife and I was better at using it than the other people were, then they couldn't hold me. And it turned out that there were enough other people who felt the same way that we got out.
it's interesting because what happens, I'm sorry, but one of the things that happens when you talk about food and our food today coming in a box, we don't have any experience with slaughtering animals so that we can survive. And you're saying that at that time, it was necessary and it was a common thing that people without money, the patrician class didn't have to worry about slaughtering animals, so they wouldn't have that kind of experience.
No.
But the people that had to slaughter animals for their food would.
Well, the patrician class, even if they didn't have to slaughter the animals themselves,
What would it look
when
like?
they walked through the public square, they saw the goats on hooks.
Yes.
So how did you get your people to follow you? How did you get your fellow man to support your rebellion and fight with you? Because without, what did you tell them? What did you say to them? Because without giving them any kind of information, why are they following you? How are they not on the side, stand on the side with their oppressor? Like, what did you tell them to tell them that this shouldn't be your life? You should fight against this.
You have
I
options.
didn't have to tell them very much.
Just followed you and just said, "Oh,
No,
I'm gonna do what?"
They had seen me with a knife. I don't understand why this is so confusing for you people.
I'll tell you.
Because it is confusing, because there were hundreds of millions of Roman overseers, and they had all of the power, and you guys didn't have any, and you ended up disrupting the empire.
I don't think there's a Roman numeral for
Something we have to learn to do.
I don't think there's a Roman numeral for million. I'm pretty sure it's a lot, but where we were, there were no however many
Soldiers.
Illions. There was us, and there were a few soldiers, and tired old businessmen, and money changers, and all sorts of ordinary people. And they didn't know how to use knives, and we did. And so we left.
But Mr. Spartacus, I
So
think
we
what
had no need for the press.
I think what Ms. Wells was saying is you didn't stimulate your followers through any philosophical argument. Like my pen during the Revolution was a philosophical argument to fight against tyranny and the oppression of King George III. Your revolution, if I understand it correctly, was primarily based on gaining your freedom and then gaining some riches by plunder. And it wasn't philosophical. You could care less if they were the Romans or they were oppressors, as long as you got your freedom and could get some material things through plunder. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what's interesting about that, when we talk about the song, I just for our audience's sake, you know, one of the things that we at Conversations Across Time, what we aspire to do is to bring you information, because as I say all the time, we're not trying to tell you what to think, we're just trying to make sure that you are thinking. And to that end, I don't want to call him our patron, but one of the personages, one of the historical figures that we really do revere here at Conversations Across Time, said something, and I want to share it with the audience. And I think you saw it on the screen, which is going to be the beginning at every show that we do, every episode that we do going forward after this last election. This man's quote speaks volumes to us. And it is simply, "A nation of sheep will beget a government of wolves." And that is Mr. Edward R. Morrow. I think that the people sat by, the patrician class, as I like to call them, the aristocracy in Rome, didn't have any experience with being able to defend themselves, because they were a government of wolves, but they were a government of wolves who ruled through the notion that everyone knew they were in charge, and they had the Roman army at their behest. Even though in your time the Roman army was all fighting at some other fronts, and they didn't even take your movement or your rebellion seriously. So I wanted to put that out there, because I want to make sure that the audience understands precisely what you're saying. You were fighting for your freedom.
Right, and seem to have no need for the press. But we have a different situation here. And we have somebody who was elected as a minority president because the press failed us, I think. And I think that these two publishers, actually three publishers in a way,
Yes.
should let us know how you fought lynching through, and you insisted on the end of slavery, among other things, and you talked about the revolution in a philosophical terms, and it set the world on fire.
And I want to say something, Mr. Paine, because it's important. The American Revolution would not have happened. I mean, everyone gives credit to your pamphlet in terms of common sense. But can we hear you speak a little bit for our audience about tyranny? Because that's exactly what led you, I believe, that was the impetus for you writing Common Sense.
Yeah, two things. First of all, the free press is the most important thing in terms of freedom and liberty. Without that, all the other freedoms fall by the wayside. Free press and free speech, let me put those together. And my pamphlets were basically to arouse the colonists. Now, not all the colonists could read, so a lot of it went from the my class, the aristocracy, who read it, word of mouth, to the people under them.
What about the town crier, which
and the
which
town
Spartacus
criers
just
also,
talked
yes,
about?
yes, they did. Especially in the New England states, got my message to the population. But I basically wanted to stimulate the people, open their eyes to the type of tyranny that was being inflicted on the colonies by George III and the Parliament. And in fact, they try to shut us up. Now, a lot of people know that the tax on tea and the Tea Party, but they Parliament passed a law at George's assistance called the stamp tax, which meant you had to pay a tax on anything that you would send or any kind of legal document, which meant newspapers and pamphlets and any type of legal document. Now, their justification was to raise funds, but in a way, it was to suppress the press, because if it cost a lot more money to produce a pamphlet or a newspaper, then it would become harder for us to get out the message to the people. So going back to that time, with the stamp tax, they tried to shut up the people who would stimulate the people to overcome oppression and tyranny.
To think.
Right, to think, exactly right. And we will call it fascism, but back then we didn't have the term fascism. I think fascism became popular in the 20s with the rise of Mussolini in Italy, and then later on Hitler. But the tyranny of George and the English Parliament towards the colonies is the same type of tyranny we see by fascists, and the potential for the same type of tyranny in our country with the president, the president and his advisors, who seem to be anti-liberty and pro-suppression.
Let's
And
throw out some of the
Mr. Greeley,
elements.
because he faced the same thing, and Miss Wells too.
Yes, that is true. Mr. Spartacus mentioned having food in the box. I'm afraid in this particular era, people want their news and information in a box, all neatly packaged like a birthday present, and they don't want to think for themselves. I, however, when I was in Vermont, I read every book at the town library, and I had very low formal education.
That's where you grew up, Vermont?
Well, that was the town I
Spend a considerable
I
amount
spent a lot
of
of time, much time there, yes. And in my newspaper, the Tribune, I got away from such scandalous stuff, and I published serious discussions about the issues of the day, including like the various schools of what's called socialism and abolition and women's suffrage. And so I had the confidence in the American public that to make them think for themselves. I believed in raising the quality of journalism, to have people think seriously about serious events. Like, I remember I had as my correspondent from Europe, two fellows from Germany. Their names were Marx and Engels and Bidoff. Yes, Bidoff.
those two fellows.
Yes, I expect to hear great things from them.
Well, you
heard something from them.
Yeah.
But you would
Yes,
not have
excellent.
published in your newspaper some of the things that were currently published or put on the websites or on the internet about Hillary Clinton running a child porno ring.
Yes, out of a pizza shop.
Yes,
Right,
I remember that.
and things like, you would have avoided that, whereas prior to your establishing the Trib, you would find papers that only printed scandals.
Rag
And
sheets.
yeah, right. I guess,
Yes.
but
We
the thing.
still got them.
Oh, yeah,
Well, of course we do. That's where I believe President Trump gets a lot of his information
All of
from the
it.
National Enquirer.
Oh,
And
yes.
that's where he got his information about the father of one of the candidates being involved in Kennedy's assassination.
Mr.
He said he
Cruz,
got
I
it
believe,
right out
yes.
of the
Senator
the National Enquirer. But you would not publish any of that stuff.
No, I believe that that these stories should be thoroughly investigated by my reporters before publishing it. Like I said, I believe in high journalistic standards, and I'm afraid for these electronic things, like what you call the internet and Twitter, you don't have that. Any lie like that child pederasty ring you mentioned. It could go out on what you call the internet and go spread all over the country, and people would credulously believe that.
Yeah, if
So-
they haven't
rather
got a
than
brain.
thinking for themselves.
So for you and Miss Wells, no fake news and no alternative news, correct?
No alternative
Try
facts.
to find-
What alternative facts? I mean,
We
they're
call
lies.
them lies. We call
Yes,
them
I
lies.
mean that is more appropriate.
And I know Miss Wells in her paper, she did a lot of research to document what she was saying.
Yes, I commend
Because
Ms.
I'm
Wells.
sure people would not like to believe the horrors that you
Reported.
uncovered. And what did you uncover and what did you report? And
A
what
lot.
was the response?
I think it's the responsibility of the media to give information that is truthful and well thought out, to, as a people, to continue to grow and continue to get the information out there. If there's people in our society that feeds us news as if it's real news, and
And it's fantasy land.
it's fantasy. It's the people must know before they can act that there is no educator to compare to the press. And what happens with the press is that people will say one thing and they don't fight it. And that has been, they don't challenge it, they don't research it.
So
And that
you're
has
saying
been
that-
one of the issues over.
I am afraid so.
The
Jane.
obligation, you're saying that you see it as a publisher. Your view is that there's an obligation of the press to educate people.
There's very much an obligation of the press to educate the people, because in order for the information to get out, the press has been that primary force that has always been there, feeding the people this information. And even with today's times, with our social media and our Facebooks and our Twitters and our Instagram, how we getting this information out to these people is because the press is failing us. The people are now taking it upon themselves to get this information out. And that's what I was doing. That's what other people on this panel are doing. We are trying to find a way to make sure that we get the truth out, because the media has failed us and the media continues to fail us by not putting out the right information, by not challenging people like our president, who says he's going to do this and this is right and this is wrong and you should be listening to me. Yet nothing that he says has any truth. Nothing that he says has been fact checked. Nothing that he says
in any way
means
resembles
anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything.
I would concur. Ms. Wells. I mean, I believe that all schools of thought, all doctrines should have an airing so that the public could think for themselves.
You've heard Mr. Horace Greeley issue a challenge. I want you to think about Mr. Greeley's challenge and figure out for yourself what it is that you need to do. And this is Vivian Crawford saying to you on behalf of Conversations Across Time, where we're not trying to tell you what to think, but we do want to make sure you are
across
thinking.
time.
Thank you.
Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.